The lightning outside Flight 447 illuminated the dark storm clouds as 37-year-old Mike Thompson held his 8-year-old daughter Sarah's hand, trying to keep his own anxiety from showing on his face. Sarah clutched her worn teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, and pressed closer to her father as the turbulence made the aircraft shudder around them. Mike wore a simple blue button-down shirt and khaki pants, the casual attire of someone traveling on a modest budget. He and Sarah were returning home from visiting his parents in Denver, a trip they had saved for months to afford. As a freelance graphic designer and single father, Mike carefully managed every expense to provide for Sarah while building his small business from their apartment. 3 rows behind them, Drive. Elena Rodriguez was reviewing medical journals on her tablet, trying to distract herself from her own discomfort with flying. As a cardiac surgeon at Boston General, she was accustomed to high-pressure situations, but something about being trapped in a metal tube at 35,000 feet had always made her nervous. The storm outside was getting worse, and even the experienced travelers were beginning to look concerned as the aircraft pitched and rolled through the violent weather. Mike noticed the flight attendants moving more urgently through the cabin, their professional smiles not quite hiding their own growing anxiety. Suddenly, the aircraft dropped sharply, causing passengers to cry out in alarm. Sarah whimpered and buried her face against her father's shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart," Mike said softly, though his own heart was racing. "It's just a bumpy ride. Remember when we drove through the mountains and the road was really winding? This is like that, but in the sky," the captain's voice came over the intercom. But instead of the usual reassuring tone, there was tension in his words that made everyone listen more carefully. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties in addition to the severe weather. Flight attendants, please prepare for possible emergency procedures." A few minutes later, the lead flight attendant's voice filled the cabin with an announcement that sent a chill through every passenger. "We have an urgent request. If there are any licensed pilots aboard this aircraft, particularly anyone with military or fighter jet experience, please press your call button immediately." The cabin fell into stunned silence. Passengers looked around at each other with growing fear as they realized the implications of such an unprecedented request. Mike felt his stomach drop, but not just from fear. He pressed his call button. "Daddy, why did you push the button?" Sarah asked, looking up at him with worried eyes. "Because sometimes when people need help, we have to try to help them," Mike replied gently. The lead flight attendant, Jennifer Walsh, approached their row quickly. "Sir, do you have pilot experience?" "Yes," Mike said quietly. "I was a Navy fighter pilot for 12 years. FA-18 Super Hornets. I've been out for 5 years, but I maintain my civilian pilot's license." Jennifer's relief was visible. "Sir, we need you to come to the cockpit immediately. Both pilots are incapacitated due to food poisoning, and our co-pilot is struggling to handle the aircraft in these conditions alone." Mike looked at Sarah, his heart breaking at the fear in her eyes. "Sweetheart, Daddy needs to go help fly the airplane. I need you to be very brave for me." Dr. Rodriguez, who had overheard the conversation, leaned forward. "I'm a doctor. If you need to go to the cockpit, I can stay with your daughter." Mike looked at this stranger, offering to care for his most precious person. "Sarah, this is Dr. Rodriguez. She's going to sit with you while Daddy helps the pilots. Can you be my brave girl?" Sarah nodded, though tears were streaming down her face. "Will you come back?" "I promise I'll come back," Mike said, kissing her forehead. "Hold Mr. Buttons tight and remember that Daddy loves you more than all the stars in the sky." Dr. Rodriguez moved to sit beside Sarah as Mike followed Jennifer toward the cockpit. The little girl was trembling and Elena instinctively put a protective arm around her. "What's your dad's name?" Elena asked gently. "Mike Thompson. He used to fly fighter jets for the Navy, but now he makes pretty pictures on the computer for people," Sarah replied, her voice small but steady. In the cockpit, Mike found a scene of controlled chaos. The remaining co-pilot, James Martinez, was struggling to maintain control of the aircraft while dealing with multiple system failures caused by lightning strikes. "Thank God you're here," James said. "I've got 15 years of commercial experience, but I've never dealt with anything like this. We've lost primary navigation, the autopilot is offline, and we're flying blind through this storm." Mike slid into the captain's seat and immediately began assessing the situation. His hands moved over the controls with the muscle memory of thousands of hours in high-stress flight situations. "What's our altitude and heading?" Mike asked, his voice calm and professional despite the chaos around them. 34,000 feet. Heading 270, but we're being pushed off course by the windshar, James replied. Mike studied the instruments, noting which systems were still functional and which had been damaged by the lightning. We need to get below this storm. Can you give me 20 degrees of flaps and start our descent to 25,000? As they worked together to stabilize the aircraft, Mike drew on every bit of his military training. Flying an FA-18 in combat conditions had taught him to think clearly under extreme pressure and to work with whatever systems were still functioning. I'm going to try to navigate us toward clearer weather using dead reckoning and the emergency compass. Mike said, we need to find a break in this storm system. Back in the cabin, drive, Rodriguez was keeping Sarah calm by engaging her in conversation about her father. Your daddy must be very smart to know how to fly airplanes. Elena said, he's the smartest daddy in the whole world, Sarah replied with fierce pride. He teaches me about clouds and stars and he makes the best pancakes on Sunday mornings. What does he like to do when he's not working? Elena asked, trying to keep the conversation light despite the turbulence. He likes to read me stories and help me with my art projects. And sometimes we go to the park and he pushes me on the swings really high, Sarah said. He says I'm his co-pilot in life. Elena felt her heart tighten at this glimpse into the relationship between the brave man in the cockpit and the little girl beside her. In the cockpit, Mike and James had managed to find a pocket of calmer air and were working to re-establish contact with air traffic control. This is Flight 447. Declaring emergency, Mike spoke into the radio. We have incapacitated crew members and are operating with emergency pilot assistance, requesting priority landing at nearest suitable airport. The response crackled through the static. Flight 447, this is Denver Control. We have you on radar. Vector heading 285 for approach to Denver International. Emergency crews are standing by. For the next 40 minutes, Mike and James worked together to bring the damaged aircraft safely through the storm and line up for an emergency landing. Mike's fighter pilot training proved invaluable as he compensated for the damaged navigation systems and maintained control despite the challenging conditions. Sarah's going to be so proud of you, James said as they began their final approach. I just want to get home to her safely, Mike replied, his focus entirely on the landing ahead. When Flight 447 touched down at Denver International Airport, the cabin erupted in applause and tears of relief. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft, but everyone aboard was safe. Sarah ran into her father's arms the moment he returned to the cabin, and Mike held her tighter than he ever had before. You did it, Daddy. You saved everyone, Sarah said, her voice filled with awe and love. We all worked together, Mike replied, looking around at the passengers who had supported each other through the crisis. Dr. Rodriguez approached them as they prepared to disembark. Mike, I've never seen anything like what you did up there. You saved all of our lives. I just did what I was trained to do, Mike said modestly. No, Elena replied firmly. What you did required not just training, but character. You left your frightened daughter to help strangers because it was the right thing to do. In the weeks that followed, the story of Flight 447 made national news. Mike was invited to appear on talk shows and receive commendations, but he declined most of the attention, preferring to focus on his life with Sarah. However, the experience did change their lives in unexpected ways. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been deeply moved by the bond between father and daughter, established a scholarship fund for children of single parents pursuing aviation careers. Mike was offered a position as a flight instructor at a prestigious aviation academy, providing both better income and the opportunity to use his skills to train the next generation of pilots. Most importantly, Sarah learned that her father was not just her hero, but a real hero who had risked everything to save others. The experience deepened their bond and taught her that sometimes the greatest acts of courage come from ordinary people who choose to help when help is needed. Most the teddy bear Mr. Buttons became a symbol of their journey together, and Sarah never forgot the lesson her father taught her that stormy night, that when people need help we have an obligation to help them if we can, even when it's scary, even when it's hard, and even when it means leaving the safety of our seats to face the unknown. Mike's story became a reminder that heroes often sit in seat 17E, wearing casual clothes and worried about making ends meet. But when crisis calls, they step forward not because they seek glory, but because their character demands nothing less than service to others. If this story reminded you that heroism often comes from ordinary people who choose to act when others need help, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need encouragement about the impact they can have in unexpected moments. Subscribe to Kind Heart Daily for more stories about how our past experiences prepare us for future opportunities to serve others. And please comment below about a time when your skills or training helped others in an emergency or when someone stepped up to help you when you needed it most. Your story might inspire someone else to be ready to help when the moment comes.